Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review God's Favorite Idiot. This, of course, is episode 4 through 6. So, considering how, the first three episodes went on to be a thing, I decided to kind of continue this show. I would have wanted to try to do it, every other day, but, new releases happened, just other certain days where I wanted to try to get this out quicker happened, and it didn't happen. So, hence why nothing comes out perfectly the way I'd like it to. But it is what it is. So, God's Favorite Idiot, episodes 4 through 6. I feel like any of the things that should have happened from 4 through 6 should have happened in the first three episodes. I really think that at some point there would have been a real turning point instead of turning off point for a lot of viewers. Because I think if people weren't to really get sold within those first three episodes, they shouldn't have been sold on the show. Because really, I wasn't really sold. I was like, no. But it seems that 4 through 6 is to really be relying on one character and one character alone, because everyone else is kind of either already doing just one thing that is just not really all that interesting, or we have characters that are trying to eventually do something in this show, or like Tom, we consistently have Tom doing a bunch of stuff in every episode. To where it's not always the same, but at some points it's similar. So, within these three episodes, we are to not only showcase Satan and what she is to do, which is probably the best character in the show so far, hands down, easily, because it's more interesting. There is a lot of things that this character is going on and doing compared to everyone else. And it's just an interesting character compared to everything else that's going on that's just been the same thing for the last 6 episodes. It's rinse and repeat. You'll give some random videos and random things that I guess are supposed to make people laugh. Or just be the sign of the times, where it's like, hey, this is obviously popular. Let's go on and obviously do this. But so... really, this show is simply interesting because of what Satan is doing in the show. And the funny thing is, we have this war going on that is only being fought by 2 whole people. Technically, if you count 3, if you count Frisbee going on and being at a desk in heaven, telling people that the desk is not a place for them to go on and battle and attack and whatever. The desk is some kind of childish, oh hey, no, this is no hit zone, or this is this isn't a thing to attack. So, but the war that's brewing is only between one angel and one devil, and everyone else is not there. So it's a war only with 2 whole people, as if this is Deadpool, and Deadpool is to go on to Xavier Mansion and realize that there's only Colossus and Negasonic Teenage Warhead only in the Xavier School for the Gifted. To where eventually, I think in the sequel, they try to bring up more characters, eventually like Xavier's and Beasts and whatever. But still, we're still really just saying that this show obviously is to try with the limited budget it has to do what it can. But again, we don't really have much depth for still any of these characters within 6 episodes. We kind of just have the Reverend in this show that is to just have a number of catchphrases that he goes to because he has nothing else going on, with the exclusion of what he is to eventually make a deal with, or broker a deal with within this episode. Yeah, he has some interviews and stuff like that in these episodes, but really we just have like catchphrases for this character, and if he has nothing else to say, he'll just kind of throw those up, obviously. So we go into these episodes, and now we have to talk about everybody else but Satan, and man, is that difficult. Because Clark and Emily are to just be relationship people, and all they have to do is like progress the relationship, even though it kind of really feels like they are to barely show the relationship, but it is what it is. Like, it feels like both of them are eventually, because of what's going on, end of world, is to really just find one another. Which Mosin and Wendy, like, it's kind of hilarious where Wendy is to go on and say, it's like, well, if the world's gonna end, like, Mosin, you're a really nice guy. It's like, I'm sorry, if the world is ending, like, shack up, get with this guy, and marry him all in one day, because the world is coming to an end. Like, that never made sense to me of how anybody would go on and take the world's ending. Like, I get there's some people that if they were to be told, hey guys, the world is ending tomorrow, a lot of people would say that it's a hoax. A lot of people would go on and be like, don't read into anything anyone's saying. Like, I think the world's going to be fine. Like, that's kind of like when people are to scare you with global warming and all this kind of stuff, to where it's just like, yeah, like, I'm sure eventually the world will just correct itself, or eventually someone will figure out how to correct it. So, with that said, we have Wendy, we have Mosin, who are to Mosin is Mosin is to still go on with his Rubik's Cube, and that's all he has. Besides him kind of going to Wendy and saying, like, hey, something that you said in the last whatever episode, let's talk about that a little, just to eat up time. And then Wendy is to kind of go on and just be like, well, yeah, like what I just said from past episode, let's repeat the exact same thing that I said, and then walk away. And then Mosin is just like, oh, okay, well, I guess that meant really nothing. So he walks away. And so, man, is that great. Mosin is back into his Rubik's Cube, because what else can he do? Tom is going on and needs to be a character that is whatever the episode needs him to be. In some episodes, he's being involved in the Council of Clark. In some episodes, he's going on and being a bodyguard. In some episodes, he's going on and being a LARPer or some other thing, whatever they freaking need for him to do via that episode. And it's always just like, okay, like, I guess if they're really trying to do something with a character, I guess Tom would be the one. It seems that Wendy, they're trying to have her like get some kind of character stuff, but it seems that everything that they have her do kind of feels like the Buzz Killington character, where whatever Wendy is doing, immediately everyone is kind of coming into the scene and going on and like, wow, Wendy, like, whatever you're doing is just straight up gangster awful. So I feel bad for Wendy, honestly. Hopefully at some point she's going to be able to do something good instead of something that everyone hates at some point. So with that said, we not only get Satan in this episode, but then we also get God, for whatever reason that is to really not matter. Sadly enough, we could have had really just the angel tell Clark what God wants him to do, instead of wasting our time casting God in the show. To just kind of cut the budget a little bit. But maybe at some point God will be more effective somewhere down the road. Much more effective than Satan is. because that would be great. And a lot of people might have their problems about how Satan is depicted or God is depicted. I don't really care when really looking at it. It's just a show that is to go on and just still be like the killer of time. Um, really, like, these episodes were much more interesting than the last three. So I could say that. So do I feel won over by this show? I would have to say, yeah. I would have a hesitatingly yeah reaction, just because at least there's something more interesting going on, even though I also have to go on and make fun of it and poke fun. Because I'm feeling by the very last episode of the season, I will actually be won over by this show, and then I'll be like, well, the show's over. Well, that sucked. Because really, if I'm won over by the last episode, then eventually, like, it may not get renewed, because a lot of shows that wind up on Netflix just kind of do their one-off season, then you never see them again, because that's what happens all the frickin' time, and that's so annoying. Because very rarely do shows get renewed, simply because Netflix is to just go on and just be like, well, like, we need star power, we need this character, we need this kind of show, and to just kind of limp them on through a certain time period where things aren't going that well, or they need to desperately come up with certain kind of shows that appeal to people the most. Superhero, supernatural, something with super in the title, because that seems to be a work thing. Um, Paranormal, that seems to be usually the route also. Or really, oddly, we have it to where, bizarrely, people doing shows about cults that make no sense to me, because I think that that's garbage. But anyways, so let's go. We've talked far too much about these episodes. Let's really break them down, hopefully, if I can remember everything that happens in 3 episodes. Plus, I tried to consistently watch this yesterday and review this yesterday. And right around the time that I was trying to do this, just wasn't the right time. It really wasn't. So I was like, oh my god, I have to remember 3 episodes of stuff within a following day. Man, is that going to be horrible. So with that said, currently available on Netflix, still, like, it's winning me over at the end of the day now, but there really should have been a lot of a quicker way to win people over in the early stages of the show. What a mistake it is to have, like, us almost like getting halfway through the show, and that's when we find something interesting. Because everything else is just a failed attempt after failed attempt after failed attempt. What a dumb thing to do. Because a person glowing is not to get me interested enough in this show. It just isn't. But these episodes are better, let's just say. So with that said, it's going to double 5. It's about the time to just go into spoil time. It's about that time again to spoil these episodes. So episode 4, if we didn't say that we were to have Satan come onto this show, now in episode 4 we have Satan, who is to be here. Satan is to also have bosses, weirdly. So she has to be told by people what to do, because Satan is to be working with like Beelzebub and some other guy's name, which I think is probably Lucifer. Which I'm just like, okay, so, like, instead of the devil just being the devil, like, the devil has many forms, I guess, is really what we have to go on and just say here. Whatever goofy reason. So we have Satan, and so we have Clark, and we have, of course, Emily, that are to go on, and in this goofy episode, they end up wanting to try and come up with a way to spread God's message out there, because Clark tried to do flyers and it did not work out. So Clark is to go with Emily to do this bizarrish TikTok thing where he's to go on and dance, and he's to go on and say, "Go, go, God, God." And we have like Emily who pitches in and is to like do this kind of weird like thing with her scooter and all this kind of stuff. So never really cared for TikTok stuff, but it's a culture thing. It's a pop culture thing that eventually anybody who is to go on and do dancing videos, like, good on you. I have no flack for anybody who is to go on and be rich and famous because they do TikTok videos, because that's the new thing. And what do I have to say because I'm nobody? So you go ahead and you dance all that you want. So for however long your videos are. So we have God's favorite idiot, and so like that's the first thing that they're doing in the early parts of this episode to try to spread God's message through a weird, bizarre TikTok thing. But not only that, we go on and we have these characters meet up with Satan, because Clark and Emily are to eventually find out by Shamel that quite a bit of their home is to go on and be protected. They end up to continue to calling it Harry Potter. Like, I Harry Pottered your house, which basically means like you put like the shield over the house and someone cannot be invited in. It's kind of more like they should have called it like more like a vampire thing, because I think everybody knows that more than Harry Potter. But like that's just me. Everybody is to know that a vampire cannot be invited into a home, much more so than Harry Potter. Not everybody is to be up on the Harry Potter, because that was how many years ago that those movies came out. Even though Fantastic Beasts was a thing, I would just say that like I think vampires have always been a much more popular pop culture thing, but that's just me. Because I'm much more of a supernatural thing than wizard. So we have them say that like their house is Harry Pottered and shielded from the devil, because the devil is going to make her way here, and so we have Shamel that is telling these guys that they've went on to also like Harry Potter, like certain areas that they go off to regularly go to work. If there's certain places where they kind of deviate and whatever, that's when Satan is going to attack. And we also have consistently where either Shamel or Frisbee, because Frisbee is technically an angel, is going on and eventually needing to have to Harry Potter certain areas to protect them from Satan. So Satan is to arrive, and Shamel is to try to silence her and bubble her. But eventually, Satan then is finally able to talk, and so Satan is to go on and try to convince both Clark and Emily to come to the dark side, technically, because they have free cookies or something like that. It's always the goofy joke that I always have to make when eventually someone is to try to get seduced or turned to some side of things. So Satan is to go on and tell Clark and Emily, like, well, hey, like I can go and make life better for you. As Emily is to tiptoe her way out of the like the sealed place, and so Satan is to go on and use her magic to break open Emily's shirt to have seductive powers being used upon Emily, and then Clark is to realize that Emily is out of this barrier, and so he pulls her out. And Emily's like, what was that? And Clark was like, yeah, you were out of the barrier. And like she tried to use her Satan wicked powers to want to try to lure me to her side. So we have Satan that just kind of goes on and just bickers and is to always just be like, well, hey, like, what did God ever do to you? Like, what did God ever do for you? And this and that, and like Satan is going on and saying that she's gonna like go on and do all these things for Clark, to try to figure out ways to make him happy. So we have Clark and we have Emily that is not falling for Satan's lure, so to speak. So we go on and we have Clark and Emily that go into the next day, and so we have it where Satan is to lure both Clark and Emily with treats, all of their favorite ever foods, going on and luring Emily to Satan with just pure like alcohol, because Emily just drinks or eats everything that has tequila in it. To where it's just like, man, like we just like every character just has one thing about them and nothing else beyond that. Like we never have anything that gets very creative with any of these characters. It's true. Uh, we also have the Reverend that is to go on and just be like, the righteous are right, and that's all he has. That's his catchphrase. So as he's going on doing the interview, where he's going on and talking about Johnny Cash and that he hopes he's rotting in hell right now. But like he took a quote from Johnny Cash as "I've been everywhere, man," and so like the Reverend is going on and on about like that. He's seen a thing or two, so like people should be relying on him rather than relying on some man who glows. That is just some trickery or something like that. That eventually a remote will come out of his butt at some point, probably, right? From the other episode. So we also have the Reverend who's going on and doing this speech at some church where like he goes on and is to like just mention this kind of scripture from the Bible, and then is to mention that he wants to go and punch Clark in the face. Not much for this character to really do. But then he also goes on and he is to realize that he's doing so well at this, at him going on and getting the word out there, that eventually he's looking at this private jet, to where the devil kind of steps in and she's like, like I can go on and give you that private jet. Like I think that's what you well deserve. And so the priest is just like, yeah, that's what I think I deserve. So eventually we find out that a priest himself has gone on to side with the devil, and eventually when the Reverend is to appear in front of Clark and want to attack him, come to find out the Reverend is to be Harry Pottered from Clark, and because Clark is trying to grab onto Clark and realize that he's shielded, because come to find out now the Reverend is to have sold his soul to the devil, so he's basically just as equally blocked as the devil is. So that kind of gets really interesting. But anyways, covering all that Reverend crap so I can get that out of the way. So now so we have Satan, who's luring Clark and Emily with all this food, and like to the point to where she goes on and takes all these hot dogs and is to put them in her hands and burn them all with her firepower that is in her hand, and chucks it. And they're like, well, yeah, that's just wasteful food. Because she's kind of bitter of the fact that there's no way for her to get these people simply buy food to come out. And so now she has to go on, and because she has to use basically the seven deadly sins to try to get these people attracted to, like, she used lust before, now she's going to use gluttony. So she only has to, and that's like, I was like, wow, just realizing that now, just thinking like, oh yeah, like she has to use like the seven deadly sins to eventually try to go on and get people to come to the dark side, because that's the way things work. Um, so we go on into this story, and we have Clark and Emily who go to work. So we also have Tom, who in this fourth episode is to go on and have this council of Clark. And Mosin and Wendy have no real interest in really doing the council of Clark thing. And Tom is just wanting to desperately just be the leader of something, because if he can't do anything else, he can't be Clark's bodyguard, he can't go on and eventually be a LARPer, then I guess he has to go on and just be the Council of Clark guy. So we have Tom that's kind of upset that eventually Clark really isn't giving these guys a lot of information about like why he's glowing, or that really what does the glowing mean, like if this is all a religious thing, what all does it mean? And Clark really isn't going to say anything until he absolutely has to, which is coming up fairly soon. So Mosin and Wendy are just kind of throwing their hands up and like, dude, this is a waste of my time. Like, I want to go home and I want to drink some red wine. I don't want to be here. I'm out skis. So Wendy and Mosin leave because they're back to their Rubik's Cube and their possible relationship that may or may not happen, even though the world is technically ending soon. Here's one thing. Shouldn't we go on, and here would be a really cool show. I think we should go on and have heaven and hell battle simply because of one person's relationship, whether a relationship is going to work out. Wouldn't that actually be an interesting show? That would be one interesting thing, because a lot of relationships don't work out anyways. So that would be a cool kind of like romantic / like battle action show that they can go on and do, where like if you have the night game, the real Ghostbusters episodes where everything is tied onto one soul, and no one is neutral. No one could be like both bad and evil. So, and they're fighting over this one soul. Like, how about fight over two souls, and eventually just be like, hey, if this like this relationship has to consistently work out, or eventually hell will win. That would be like a really cool, interesting story that they can go into, of forcing a relationship to always to work, even if they fall out of love. That would be interesting. But anyways, so we have Emily and we have Clark go on, and Clark, of course, is to really at this point not want to talk to any of his coworkers. He just wants to go on and go to the bathroom and have his own time by himself, which really, that never really is to happen, hence why Clark is constipated. So Clark is going into the bathroom playing Candy Crush. So we go on, we have God who has appeared to Clark in this bathroom. And so God is to mention to Clark that, like, hey, like, your pants are up, so I know that you're not actually going to the bathroom. So Clark comes out of the stall seeing God there, and God's a woman. So, and Clark is like, well, I kind of assumed that God would be a woman, but like, I don't know, I always had my thoughts. Because a lot of times we would go on and see like wild and goofy variations of God, Like at some point, we would just see that God would be like this old man, or God would eventually be like a million different species all just crammed into one character. I think that's like the South Park God or something. Or eventually we would just kind of go on and just see these wild variations of what God really should be at some points. Because stuff to do. Alanis Morissette was God in Dogma, so that is what it is. So nothing wrong with Alanis Morissette. I liked that. It was just like okay, like another God character that doesn't even talk because how could she? So so going into this show, we have God who's talking to Clark, and really like she could have just sent everything that she wanted Clark to do. She really just could have sent him all of this in a tweet. Like she didn't really need to show up. Like any of this message just kind of fell on deaf ears for me because really it's just God saying like, well, yeah, like just tell everybody that all their religions are right and like I love all of them and that they should try to go on and like pray and believe and whatever harder. So Clark is just like, okay, I'll send that message out, and but how do I send it? And so God is to give Clark the card for that USA Today woman, Judy. So Clark is now to try to immediately go on, and after he talks to God that he met her in a bathroom, oddly. Clark goes on and is trying to message this reporter, and Judy, when she finally does answer the phone, is on a date with Satan. Because we come to find out that Satan's going to go on and use certain people that are involved in Clark's life. Judy's going to be one of them. Gene is going to be one of them, Clark's father, to eventually either hurt people or eventually like use them as kind of chess pieces. So when Clark is to consistently try to go on and he feels like he immediately needs to go on and talk to Judy, like basically F Clark's work because everyone else feels that same way. Nobody's really doing much work anyways, to the point where I'm assuming at some point that this TI company is going to crumble and fall and just not really be what it is because the world's freaking ending anyways, so what else matters, right? So, like, hey, if you get paid, you get paid. Like, whatever. Because Emily is to go on and consistently keep saying that she doesn't even realize this. She doesn't even realize that she actually has a job. And man, is that telling. Um, so we go on into this story, and so Clark is trying to call this girl, and eventually, when Judy does, they are trying to reschedule. And so Satan is there going on and dating Judy, and then immediately when um, Satan is to realize that she's gone on and done the work technically, Satan then goes on and is to berate Judy and is to kind of tell her she's ugly and all this other stuff and walk away. So we go on and we have both Clark and we have both Emily, who are to eventually go on to uh, this certain location to just kind of think things through. And the problem with that is that place isn't Harry Potter yet, because it's off the usual reservation of where they would normally go. So when going on into this moment, we all of a sudden have Shamel who is racing off to. And I know I'm not quite sure all of this is all connected to every single episode, but I'm just going to go with it anyways. So, just to kind of go with the flow of just trying to cover all the things that happen in all three of these episodes. Eventually, I'm not going to go in perfect sync with every episode. I'm just going to get everything out of the way. Because I think everything that I just said all happened in episode 4, and there is some kind of stuff here and there, but eventually let's get into the next episode. So we go on and have Clark and we have Emily, who are like trying to avoid their home at some point because there's a lot of people protesting and it's getting very annoying. So Emily and Clark go off to this location and come to find out uh, we have Shamel that is telling both Clark and both Emily that they need to get out of this location because Satan is coming after them. So Shamel is going on this and driving as quickly as he can with a broken down Volvo, and we have, uh, of course, Satan who's trying to race after them with this nice motorcycle. So we have it to where how weak this car is. Shamel is to now have to attack Satan, knocking her off her bike, and so that way, like, Clark and Emily can get away. So we have Shamel that's asking Clark. It's like, well, hey, like, have you went on and called that reporter yet? And Clark is like, well, like, I tried to leave her a message, but she hasn't gotten back to me yet. Let's pause here for a second. All right. So we have Shamel that is to ask Clark, like, well, hey, like, have you gone on and called that reporter yet? And Clark's go on and mention that he's like, well, like, I left this voicemail. She hasn't gotten back to me yet. And funny enough, while both Clark and Emily are going through and doing what they're doing, Judy is calling consistently. And throughout the time of which that both Clark and Emily are in this kind of chase with Shamel, Judy is consistently calling a lot. So we have Clark and we have Emily that finally go on, and Clark is to go on and say that he feels that he should go on and he should be acting quickly with everything that he's doing. And he feels horrible that he's not really going on and doing things fast enough, because if he doesn't go on and do everything so quickly, that heaven at some point will go on and lose this battle. So within the next episode, we go on and we have Clark and we have Emily that is to meet up with Judy, because Judy has all the time in the world to go on and do this interview now that she's not dating this woman. So, because Judy shows up at this location, and so Clark is willing to do this interview, and so he lays all of it out there, going on and telling things that even like his friends don't even know that like Clark was to experience, like talking with God. And Tom and Wendy and Mo and Mosen are to just be in like just like, how is it that you didn't tell us directly before you told this woman? And Clark was just like, well, there was a specific time and there was a specific day that I was supposed to go on and mention all this. So we have Wendy in this episode. Wendy, within the next episode, is to go on and have this thing with her hair, where she's thinking that since they're not doing much with the whole Counselor of Clark thing, maybe if she looks more professional by doing her hair a different way, that eventually people will find her to look more professional and be more professional. And Mosen is to be like, whoa! And Wendy's like, oh, is this too much? Is it? And Mosen's like, no, like, I think whoa means like wow, like that's great. And so Mosen is trying to backpedal and trying to save what it was he was to say. And then eventually we go on and we have Tom, who is to ridicule Wendy for her hair choice, so much so that Wendy wants to file a report with Frisbee, and so Frisbee's like, well, okay, like, all right. So we also have it toward Tom was to want to go on with Frisbee at some point in going on and wanting to spend like a half an hour every day to go on and talk about things. And Frisbee is just like, oh great, like I can make a plan about all that. And Tom realizes that Frisbee is enjoying something like that, and so he just kind of walks off, and he's just irritated. And so Frisbee's going on like, well, hey, like how about I fit you into my schedule? And so like Frisbee is even going on and saying like, well, hey, like we may need an hour some days. Let's just schedule that in. So we go on and we have Wendy that everyone is to just hate her hair, but Mosin, and till eventually Wendy is to ask Mosin. It's like, well, are you being honest with me or are you lying? Tell me the truth. So Mosin is to just say like, no, it's fine, like it's fine. So we also have Wendy who is to also give Clark this candle. And so we have Clark who is to open the scent to this candle to find out that it's the worst possible scent ever. Because while we have Clark that goes on and is to make it into the office, and everybody is to smell something unique about Clark, where it's like, oh my god, like, do you feel like there's a aroma of vintage boat in the air, or hot pockets, or some other thing? Like everyone is just all going on and smelling their like favorite thing, and whatever it is, it's just coming off of Clark, and everybody is to smell something different. So I'm just like, okay, like I think I've seen like something like that. I think I've seen that before somewhere, but I don't remember exactly where it was. So, uh, God, I'm trying to remember also. I can't remember. So, oh yeah, it was from the John Travolta Michael movie, I think is what it was. Yeah, that's what it was from. Um, Luckily I caught that. So it's as if everybody just went on and just watched every angel devil movie that they could find, and eventually just went on. I'm just waiting for the Conjuring Exorcist freaking episode at one point, which will be gross and weird and whatever, because the show needs to just be whatever it is. So we go on and we have Wendy with this awful smell, so much to the point where Clark is trying to re-gift this gift from Wendy and give to Frisbee, but then Wendy is to find out that Clark is to have like left this scent by Frisbee's desk, and so Wendy gives it back to Clark, saying like, "Oh yeah, you forgot your candle." And so when they all go on and reopen this gift and smell it, come to find out that this candle is to basically be a awful smell that no one should actually smell. And Wendy is to think that it's a certain kind of scent, which she was wrong about it, because like it was to her like she read it wrong, and so come to find out it was some person's like genitals or whatever. So hence why the awful smell. So probably leaving Wendy to just second guess everything. But we also had a moment where Mosin and Wendy were to talk about how, like, Wendy said that Mosin was nice, and Mosin is like, well, what was about that? And so she's like, well, I just wanted to say that you were nice. And Mosin is like, oh, okay. So they do nothing with that. Isn't that great? So Clark is to go on and do this interview with Judy, and so Judy is to go on and record this, and so all of a sudden Mosin is to go on and say like his whole life story, and we're like, okay, like that's not the person that she's interviewing. She's interviewing Clark. So Clark goes on and is to rattle off all the stuff that he has been experiencing lately, going on with the glow, to where when he's to need to glow because he can control it more, he doesn't glow. And Emily is telling Clark that like the whole world is depending on Clark glowing right now to try to make him glow, and he doesn't, and she gets really upset and angry and yells at him. So, but Clark is to go on and mention that he is to speak with God in the turlet, and all of his friends are like, "Oh my God, you spoke with God and you didn't tell me." And Clark is like, "Well, I needed to tell everybody now." So Clark is going on and repeating to Judy what all he's experienced in the last couple days, and so Judy is really finding this all very hard to believe. But so within by the tail end of this episode, after Clark has gone on and explained to Judy what all has happened in the last couple days, we of course have Gene that is heading to the sauna for his usual time with his son, oddly, because man, do they love that sauna. So we have it to where if Satan can't get to Clark via like Clark, then Satan is going to go on and twist and turn and eventually come to other people, and the next person just so happens to be Gene. Because Satan is going on to talk to a guy that is supposedly Leviathan, which, of course, if you don't know what a Leviathan is, it's basically just a huge, big, monstrous demon. But, like in this case, it's just some guy who is to be in this suit and has this kind of Bluetooth and is to, I guess, be the person that Satan is to be the lower totem pole character of. So, but she ends up talking to a character named Leviathan, but come to find out she actually speaks to like Beelzebub and all those characters, but who knows how really low Satan really is on the totem pole of things, even though she has two other higher up people still. Anyways, so Satan is to go on and talk to Gene. So Gene and Satan are have this conversation, and so Satan is to lie that she basically is Emily, the girl that Clark has been dating, because Gene has never met this girl yet. So Satan is to play off that she's Emily, and so while they're talking, we have it to where like Gene is going and say it's like, well, hey, like I know that me and my son have this time and together and whatever, and it's special, and but like, hey, like if he needs to go on a date or get married or whatever, like, but show all that. Like, I want you guys to go on and like I really want him to kind of focus on this relationship and like make it so it works. So so we have Emily who's like, no, like if anything, like I really just kind of wanted to hang out with you and like just kind of talk things out. So Gene and Emily start talking, and one thing leads to another, and it seems that they're really kind of having a good rapport between one another. It seems that Emily is kind of giving some kind of points to Gene and kind of buttering him up, sadly, to eventually try to kill him off here. So eventually, by the time that Clark makes his way back home, um, come to find out, Satan is to realize, or Clark's to realize that Satan is to have gone on and tortured Clark's father by placing Gene into the sauna for far too long, to the point of him probably being very dehydrated. But then when they go to the doctors, we have the doctors that are going on and saying to Clark, it's like, well, yeah, it seems like there is a huge cluster of things wrong with this guy, besides him just being heavily dehydrated. Like, no, there's like brain problems, there's this problem, there's that problem, every human problem that could probably be problem, that's the problem. So, as if this doctor has no clue what he's talking about, because it's more than just dehydration, I guess. For being too long into a sauna. So, sweating it out. So, we go on here, and so Clark is to have to kind of figure out a way to get to his father while also being in the place of Satan. So Satan is to go on and use his fireball, and it misses Clark and it hits Judy. And so Judy is to feel the wrath of Satan. And then Judy is to go on and put out this report that sounds crazy that, like, hey, Satan is real, and that she went on and attacked me, and so on and so forth. So Judy's story is to really, whatever it is to not be believable, to where when she sends this out, like, everybody's to just kind of write her off as sadly a crazy person, even though it's not, like, it's technically in the story the truth. And nothing goes into the win column for Clark with this, like, this interview, so it basically feels like a waste. So we have Clark trying to go on and trying to eventually get to Jean, whose thing is now locked. So we have Clark that is desperately trying to go on and get his father out of this location. And so eventually Shamel swoops in, is to take out the devil, and this unlocks this door for Jean to get his father out of this place, kind of lie him on the ground. And so Jean, of course, is to be rushed to the hospital, and, like, that's how they start out the next episode. So I'm kind of rushing through these episodes, but, like, I also don't want to spend far too much time because of how long they actually all are. So we go on, and in the last episode, we have the doctor telling Clark that there's a whole bunch of problems with his father. Tom is going on and consistently just being a bodyguard for Jean. And when Clark and Emily are to be at this hospital, we of course have Frisbee, who is saying, like, well, like, I should really try to go on and try to quickly Harry Potter this hospital, because it's gonna feel like you guys are gonna be here for a while. So, like, normally I would have a bunch of paperwork to be able to do this kind of thing. And so Emily's like, seriously? Like, come on, Frisbee, like, get to work. Like, Harry Potter this hospital and do it now. And Frisbee's like, yeah, like, so just Harry Potter the place without having to go on and do any of the paperwork? Yeah, like, I'll get right on that, as he's going on and possibly just doing the paperwork. So, because he likes to go on and do all the red tape and whatever. Because, like, Frisbee was saying that, like, Shamel, like, Frisbee needed to get, like, a word from Shamel to Frisbee this hospital. So yeah, so we go on, and we have at some point where Clark is desperately pleading with Shamel to be there to heal his father. And so Clark is to, of course, be calling and praying for Shamel, and Shamel is in a battle right now with Satan, because there's a war brewing, but a war brewing between two people, and that's it, because there is no God being involved in any war. There's just Frisbee, who's on a desk filling out paperwork, and Shamel and Satan, who are battling it out. And it's kind of funny how Satan was to go on, and she was to be so aggravated that she was to say, yeah, I'm going to take one of these big angels out, and I'm going to kill them just for you. I'm going to snuff them out just for you. And the only real angel that she's probably going to fight is probably Shamel, and that's it. Because heaven forbid you could just have extras that are just lined up in the background to eventually look like they're fighting, or eventually being somehow like saying that, hey, there's angels and hey, there's devils. Because really, you could possibly go on and use anybody that's in the background of any of these other shots and could have used them as angels and demons, or any of the camera crew, or any of the people that are working on the show, like the director or the producer, and had them in the background as being angels or being devils. Alright, something's happening here. Let me pause for a second. Okay, whatever that was. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. So we go on into this episode, and we, of course, have uh, Shamel and the devil, or Shamel and Satan, who are fighting, and Shamel is telling, of course, Frisbee that he can't go on and help out Clark right now because he's too busy. Even though Shamel is hearing Clark's prayers, there's nothing he can do. So Frisbee is to be able to be so busy with paperwork that he can't go down and he can't help or say anything. So we now have it where we, of course, are having Jean's father that is probably going to die. And there's nothing that Clark can do. So we have Tom coming in, who evidently hasn't slept in a number of days, guarding Jean, and is to all of a sudden have Tom, who is to cry over Jean's body, and that tear somehow produces the ability for Jean to be healed of all of his problems. And so now we're going on and just dubbing Tom to be Tom the Baptist, and that he is to go on and heal people. Because I guess that's what he is going to have to go on and do at some points in these episodes, because they must have nothing better to do. So it's a whole joke about like John the Baptist, Tom the Baptist, and so it's a whole joke about that. So so now that Jean is to be okay, I guess we're gonna just continue on with this character, and so really within like these couple episodes, that seems to be kind of what the focus is. Like via the last episode, there's not much that I can really like remember that happens besides the whole hospital thing and like the whole battle sequence. Um, but yeah, so with that said, I think I've covered most of these episodes, but I kind of rushed through the last one. But 3 episodes of memory is very hard, as any episode would probably have to be remembering would have to be difficult. So let me know in the comments below if there's a massive number of things that I forgot, because I'm sure there probably is. Also, I think I'm also going to take a moment here to probably pause and kind of figure out if there's anything left for me to go on and rattle off and mention, because I feel there probably is. Because I kind of covered a lot of stuff, kind of in the early things to just kind of get everything of one character just kind of done and finished. Um, yeah. With that said, let me pause for a sec, and if there isn't anything to rebuttal on or anything for me to kind of come into conclusion about, I'm gonna call this one a day. So if you don't see me in the next second, then I probably didn't come up with anything. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody. All right. There was just some relationship things that I kind of remembered. So we had, after Clark was to go on and talk to God, we had God that was to mention that Emily could be a source to really help Clark figure things out. And God was to call Emily Clark's girlfriend. And so Clark then goes on and is to tell Emily, it's like, well, hey, um, like I guess God referred to you as my girlfriend, and like thoughts, like feelings, as Clark is to go on and say that he does love Emily, and supposedly Emily hasn't said it back yet, and eventually Emily is to talk to Wendy and say like, yeah, I haven't really said it back yet, and I'm kind of, I don't know what I feel. And so within the last episode, we also have both Clark and we have both Emily. That Emily just ends up deciding to just move in together with Clark because supposedly Clark is to have his home be Harry Pottered. So Emily's like, well, yeah, I just decided to just move everything in. And it surprises Clark because Clark kind of goes in and with this umbrella, kind of thinking that Satan is in his house. And come to find out, no, it's just Emily who just decided to not like lock their door. And so Clark goes in and is to find Emily making this kind of weird concoction of food that is to look like chopped off fingers in like the weirdest like approach of food ever. Um, to where they just keep going on and on about how it looks like chopped off fingers, and I'm like, this is kind of weird because they go on and they make this weird concoction of hot dogs that have ketchup on it, and like it's like all these things are just kind of surrounded in oatmeal, and it's like, okay, so just hodgepodging and just smashing together, mashing up all of this food that is to look the weirdest it can possibly make. Why not just make just oatmeal or just hot dogs, or like, why combine the three? And now I'm sure after probably everyone is to go on and watch this show, that's probably the one meal that they're gonna probably maybe try. Just like, well, like what does this weirdly taste like? Um, so yeah, so we have it where Clark is to go on and try this and just be like, wow, this is not really a food. Uh, so so yeah, so with that said, I think everything else is technically covered for the most point. I kind of hope that I went on to kind of get some stuff out of the way, or kind of focused on certain things. Um, but yeah, I think other than that, I think I'm just gonna wrap it up so I can get out of here because this is over an hour anyway. So goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.